New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. What if you had a place to return to every day for peace, clarity, and connection? The New Thought Ministry of Prayer offers live morning and evening prayer, along with a growing library you can access anytime. This is a space for reflection, renewal, and real spiritual practice, rooted in the understanding that something greater is already alive within you. You are welcome here. Join us live or watch anytime. The New Thought Ministry of Prayer, part of the New Thought Media Network. Come, take a moment for what matters most.
Hey everybody, Dr. Tracy Brown here. Thanks for joining me today for the Inclusive Church, where every week we come together to remind ourselves that we've made this commitment to have New Thought ministries and New Thought spiritual communities where oneness is not confused with sameness. Now I know the subtitle of the book is Oneness Does Not Require Sameness. But like so often what happens is really people confuse oneness with sameness. They are not the same. And to be inclusive, we have to recognize that everyone who is representing or experiencing something different from ourselves is actually, their experience is actually as valid as our own. Couple of things that I try to remember and remind myself as well as you of on a regular basis is that choosing to name this show The Inclusive Church was intentional to remind us that the church is not a piece of property. A church is the collection of people who come together to study, practice, learn, share spiritual principles and how to apply them in the world. And also, I do use the word leader quite a bit. If you want to be a leader in an inclusive community, or leaders who are committed to inclusion, think about something a certain way or do a certain thing. When I use the word leaders, I am talking about all kinds of people who in our churches demonstrate their commitment, give their service in order for the church to grow, thrive, expand, and in this case, be inclusive. So leaders definitely include anyone who's serving on your board of directors, anyone and everyone who is a part of your ecclesiastical team, everyone who is a ministry team leader, teaching classes, or marketing for your church. All of those and many more are leaders. because if we only had ministers who were leaders, it would be almost impossible for you to actually grow your church and serve as many people as possible. So, with those two things out of the way, what is the focus for today? And the theme for today, or the focus for today, is self growth. And as we're going through the next 25 to 30 minutes, I want to encourage you that if you do have a comment or if you have a question, please feel free to share it in either the comment section or the chat section, depending on which platform you are on. So why this topic? If you're a regular, you know that often there was some conversation or some event or some experience I had that made me think, "Oh, I want to talk about that on the inclusive church." And in this case, I was planning to talk about a different subject today, but I was in a meeting earlier today, and we were talking about what are the rewards of being inclusive, of being committed to inclusion, of focusing on inclusion as a leader or as a minister in a New Thought ministry. And as you would expect, there were some examples shared about, oh, yeah, it was a real, reward when you see the physical, tangible things, like we've been focused on getting people um, comfortable, right, with land acknowledgments and or the use of pronouns when introducing oneself. And then all of a sudden, after a year of doing this or 2 years of doing this in little ways and talking about it and educating people about it, then you are at an event and it happened automatically. It just was seamless, that it had become a habit in your community and it wasn't questioned anymore. And the person who planned that program, when they stood up to introduce themselves, included a land acknowledgement and their pronouns. Like, that's something you go, oh, we've been working on this. It was resisted at the beginning, and now it really is who we've become in this community. And that feels like it's a reward, like, oh, it's happening. What I'm doing is making a difference, right? Or, an example of the condition changes because your community, your church has been involved in interfaith efforts related to supporting immigrants who are in your county legally, and all of a sudden you see some article in the newspaper that doesn't point out or name your church, but the efforts that you have been putting in are having an impact because a county commissioner makes some announcement, right? It's like, oh, we can see those kinds of things. And that is an opportunity for us to actually say, oh, we are having impact, positive impact here. And this is important work that we are doing. And so that's really, really great when that happens. And there were some examples that were specific to individual people in the congregation who were changed by the efforts that have been put forth many times over years, where someone comes up or someone has the microphone and they acknowledge that, 3 years ago they didn't understand why we were having a prayer vigil when someone Black was killed while in police custody, or someone who was unarmed was arrested and then killed in the course of the arrest, and that they didn't understand. Their assumption was that surely they must have done something wrong. But over 3 years of talking to people who are African American and hearing their stories and reading multiple news sources and doing some research around some of the people who were killed, that they recognized how we were using our spiritual principles of love, of harmony, of unity to address what was an issue or challenge beyond our own circle. Or an example shared about one individual person, right? And how, in the course of a very short period of time, because they were intentionally included and addressed, they began to engage and be involved and to offer their insights, and how that makes a difference. So all of those are examples of growth, right? The community is growing. People in the community are growing and wanting to be more inclusive. That we do want to celebrate. We actually do want to celebrate that. And I'm looking for a quote. It's a Howard Thurman quote that I really love. You may have heard me use it before because I love it so much. Howard Thurman wrote, "It's not that the sense of separateness is not authentic, but merely that it is not absolute." It's not that the sense of separateness is not authentic, but merely that it is not absolute. So, yes, the sense of separation or the sense of demarcation that differences naturally display, if I'm different from you, we know that we're different from one another. It might be by race, it might be by gender, it might be by age or generation. It might be by education or profession or the language spoken. There's so many ways that we're different from each other, and that is authentic. But it doesn't have to lead to a sense of separation, or that we cannot work together, or that I'm better than you are. None of that is automatic, because if you believe, like I do, that diversity is a divine idea, right, then it's not a mistake that we are all members of different identity groups. It's not a mistake. It's the way it is. Whether we decide to make that a problem, or whether we decide to mine it for its potential, is totally up to us, individually and collectively. So when Howard Thurman reminds us that the sense of separateness is not authentic, or is authentic, but that's not really the issue. The issue is that it's not absolute. It is not the will of God. It is not spiritual law. And so when we separate ourselves through artificial hierarchies and power plays, we are literally separating ourselves from another creation of God, God in another form, spirit in another being. And it is our choice. We can do that. I can choose to behave and design my life as if I am separate from other creations of God, or I can choose instead to be guided by the absolute, the spiritual truth the law of all laws. And that will drive me to have different actions. So Tracy, get to the point. What does this have to do with self-growth? Well, I was thinking about how easy it is for us to notice the rewards of being inclusive in terms or in context of the organization and other people's behaviors. But in the conversation this morning, someone actually said their biggest reward was seeing their own growth, recognizing their own growth. And I was like, oh my, how interesting is that? Right? Seeing and recognizing their own growth. And I thought about it, and it's like, yeah, I celebrate the things that have happened in the communities I've been a part of. I'm really happy about how people who have been students in courses that I have facilitated have gone on to expand and to be more inclusive and to actually apply what we talk about in classes. I'm very proud of people who've read my books and who quote me and who share the impact that has had on them. But more than what happened externally or what other people did, yeah, there's a big focus, a big joy, a big feeling of gratitude for self-growth. Self-growth. So in the conversation this morning, we talked about that a little bit, and other people shared their experiences as well. And what I noticed was that there were several patterns, several places where that self-growth shows up that I want to look at in myself, and I want to encourage you to review and to consider in your own self-growth or your own evaluation of how you have been or are being rewarded for your commitment to inclusion. Someone mentioned that they had learned so much about other worldviews. People who had lived in different cultural situations, people who had different backgrounds, who grew up in a different city, state, country, a different part of the world, even in the same city, right? You can live in different parts of that city or county and have very different experiences that shape your worldview. So there is one big place to look at, I say I'm committed to inclusion, and what is it that I have learned about different worldviews, not better or worse, but that they are simply different. And how can I relate to someone who has a very different life experience that I do without making them bad or without impressing upon them my superiority or that my experience is better than theirs? And so worldview, yes, people who have had different experiences. And this is true. I guess this is an appropriate time for the reminder that when we are talking about inclusion, we are not just talking about race, that race and ethnicity are two of the ways we might find ourselves being different from someone. But I could be in a group or teaching a class with people who are all the same race and ethnicity as I am. And we could still have very, very different experiences based on where we grew up, the size of our family, the language that was spoken as the primary language in the home, right? All different ways that we could be really different from one another, even if our race or our ethnicity is the same. So, absolutely, worldview. My worldview has been expanded greatly by engaging with and learning from people who are different from me culturally. I've also learned a lot about myself through my commitment to being inclusive because a lot of times, right, our blind spots are things that we don't even realize. There are stereotypes that we have about people who are different from us, but we don't mean to assume things about them, but it happens because maybe I haven't been around a lot of people in a certain age group, and I have a story in my head that I've picked up on from the media and from what I've heard from other people. I didn't consciously choose to think negatively, but then I realized, oh, I made some assumptions here that may or may not apply to this particular student in my class. And so many times our self growth comes in recognizing and learning about the stereotypes or the unconscious biases that we didn't consciously choose. We just picked it up, and maybe, it seems like it must be that way because we haven't met anyone who is different from that, and we don't know. And I have experienced this like in the reverse or the inverse many times. If I've traveled to other countries and there are assumptions about Americans that if someone's telling me or asking me, do I do a certain thing or do I own a certain thing? And I'm like, why would they think that about me? Oh, because this is what they believe most Americans experience or have, right? Or if they interact with me in a certain way because of what they've heard about Black Americans and they realize I'm from the US and they're like, they think they know. They've seen some movies or they've read something in several books or elders in their community have told them certain things. And so some of our self growth is most evident when we begin to recognize our own stereotypes about other people, when we begin to recognize the things we take for granted and assume everyone else has that same experience, and the growth that we can each individually have when we recognize the limited amount of skill that we have developed on engaging in a healthy way with people who are different from us. Oh my goodness. Right? And then developing the skill to ask the right questions, to recover from a sticky situation, to actually learn more about people who have a specific cultural or generational experience. That's where the self growth comes. And the more you engage with people who are from a different identity group than your own, the more you are probably going to learn about yourself, what you assumed, and then you can replace those assumptions with new information. The artist, Sister Soldier, was quoted as saying, wisdom is not a fixed quality, it circulates among us. Repeating, wisdom is not a fixed quality, It circulates among us. So anytime I start thinking my wisdom is the only wisdom, my cultural understanding about how to do things or why to do things, when to speak up, when not to speak up, there's cultural wisdom in that, but it doesn't mean it is the only wisdom. So the more people I engage with who are different from me, I get the opportunity to find out what is their wisdom and why. One, so I can engage with them effectively, but two, so I can see my own blind spots. So, this is all I wanted to bring to our attention today. The reminder that one of the best rewards for doing the work related to valuing diversity and being inclusive in our spiritual communities and in the world is our own self growth. I want to be able to say, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, or even in a 1 day course or event, to be able to say, I learned something today about another group that I can apply. So I'm growing because I'm learning more about people who speak that language. Some of you know a few weeks ago, I was a participant and a presenter at a 5 day conference. And the conference was designed to be bilingual, Spanish and English. However, 60% or so of the people engaged in the conference, Spanish was their primary and/or only language. About 20% were bilingual with Spanish and English, and about 20%, including me, were English speakers with very little to no Spanish conversation ability. And it was great. It was not always easy. And there were moments where there was frustration for me because I couldn't actually communicate what I wanted to say or what I wanted to share. And if there wasn't someone who was an interpreter or someone who was, nearby, or someone who was bilingual and could build the verbal bridge, it was a little frustrating. And I was so, so happy to have the experience of the frustration because it reminded me of two things. It reminded me that I really could get a tutor and learn conversational Spanish if I wanted to. That is an option. And I have not chosen to do that. But if I wanted to grow and be more conversational with Spanish, I have that option. It also helped me grow in a way of being able to experience, having the actual experience of what it's like to be in an environment where the language that is being spoken is not a language you speak. And more often than not, I'm in an environment where the primary language being spoken and everything is planned around English speakers. And so it would be easy for me to forget, or for it to just be an abstract concept of, okay, there's some people here who are coming to this conference. And, there are about 20 people coming to this conference and they speak Spanish primarily. And, we're still going to speak English, and the assumptions, but to feel how that feels, to be the one who has something to contribute and nothing is set up for you to be able to do so. Side note, sidebar, yes, at this conference we had simultaneous translation, for all the presentations. So the conference planners did anticipate that there would be people who only spoke Spanish and there would be people who only speak or spoke English. But away from the formal presentations, sitting at lunch or visiting the vendors or simply taking a break and walking around the grounds of the conference hotel and wanting to develop a relationship or have a conversation with someone who didn't speak English. It's like the feeling of that, like reignited something in me that I don't want people to have that feeling unnecessarily at other conferences that I may have input into or that I may plan. So, self-growth. It is as good a measure as any, and some might say it is one of the most important measures if you're going to commit to being inclusive and if you are going to be authentic in your own growth. So I'm going to close with a quote today from Wade Davis. The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. Repeating, the world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. And isn't our commitment to being inclusive about recognizing that there's more than one way to experience the world and to create spiritual communities where many different kinds of people can come together based on their shared understanding or commitment to learn spiritual principles and values and to be included as part of that church, as part of the leadership, as part of the congregation in a way that is respectful of the different experiences that we all have based on our cultures, based on our backgrounds, and based on our experiences. So I hope you will do as I try to do, as I am committed to doing, create a culture within your church where all kinds of people are welcomed, are valued, and are engaged. My name is Tracy Brown. I hope to see you next Tuesday right here on the New Thought Media Network for another episode of The Inclusive Church.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.